So Dan Lanning and this new staff are off to a heck of a start in these six straight wins, and it's got one fan thinking and asking the question. Any parallels between Dan Lanning and Chip Kelly right now? Here we go.
You are Locked On Ducks, your daily podcast on the Oregon Ducks, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Yes, it is that time once again for Locked On Ducks. I'm your host, Spencer McLaughlin. Thank you for making this your first listen or your first view of the day. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your number one source to stay up to date with the Ducks, which is why, if you haven't already, please continue to like, comment, subscribe wherever you're listening to or watching the show. I appreciate everybody out there who has done so already. Today's episode of Locked On Ducks brought to you by Sling TV. Don't miss this week's matchup between the Ducks and the California Golden Bears right here on Sling. Sling, the TV you love for a price you love. Try it today. And yes, they do have the Pac-12 network. This week's game on FS1, they've got that too. A lot of mailbag questions coming in, and I absolutely love it. Send as many questions as you like about anything. The Ducks, life. I won't answer political questions, but everything else that you want to ask me, by all means. But I imagine you want to keep it about the Ducks. That's where I, have kind of built this show to be about. That's kind of the idea of it, hence the Oregon banner. You may notice a little bit different angle. I'm tweaking some production things, always trying to make it better for you, the listener or viewer, because I appreciate all of you so very much, including Aaron Long, who asks, how many parallels can be drawn between the start of the Lanning era and the start of Chip's tenure? Small sample size, obviously, I agree. But knowing where Chip went, I'm curious if it feels like the same trajectory is at least possible with Coach Lanning. There are a shocking number of similarities. I am not saying that there is a 100% chance Lanning is going to go on as successful a run as Chip Kelly did when he was Oregon's head coach. There are, however, a number of similarities that are worth pointing out just because it's kind of fun, and I was realizing there are more even than I thought as I was doing some research to answer this question. So, Dan Lanning has been very aggressive going for it on fourth down. I like that. Kind of a modern thing in coaching, right? You see Brandon Staley with the Chargers, who's not a very good coach. Just going to throw that out there. Not a Brandon Staley guy. Herbert needs somebody better than that. I don't know why that organization can't find a coach. Anyway, he goes for it on fourth down a lot. He's not afraid to do it in his own territory. He's aggressive. He's decisive. He pulls out the onside kick. He said they'd been working on that all week, and they went out there and they had the stones, the temerity, the audacity to do it in a big game like that with the lead, and it gets them an extra possession that leads to a touchdown. Instead of UCLA having the ball down 7, they get the ball back down 14. It was a big swing in that game. So he's got some guts, and we remember that about Chip. We all remember the chant from the student section back in the day, what it was. I don't need to repeat it. I probably shouldn't. But another thing that is similar between that 2009 year with Chip, his first season at the helm, and Lanning's here is something I talked about a lot on yesterday's show, and hopefully it'll be a recurring trend here on Locked On Ducks. And that is continued improvement week by week. And both coaches began their tenures with a nationally televised ranked showdown that was, in their own right, a calamity. I was only, let's see, I had just turned 12 when that Boise State game happened. I guarantee you, if social media had been as big and you had YouTube and I'd been hosting the show, which would have been really funny to see a 12-year-old Spencer come out here and talk, and then my voice would have gotten deeper over the next couple of years I'd hosted, would have been pretty hilarious, right? So if I'd been hosting at that time, people would have no doubt felt after that game, oh, well, did we make the wrong hire? What is going to happen here? Chip Kelly, this is a disaster. It's terrible. Like, how can you have a fight breaking out and this and that? I mean, there were still, I'm sure you could go find pieces or tweets or anything saying, boy, Chip Kelly, is that the right guy for the job? Is this the culture? All this sort of stuff. But the similarities of 2009 don't stop there for the Ducks. There was an early game in the season where Oregon easily could have lost. You could say should have lost. And they ended up winning. In 2009, that was a home game against Purdue. This year is at Washington State. Very easily could have lost, but that game seems to have propelled them forward to a run of offensive success. They both had multiple ranked wins at this point in their first tenure or their first season as coach. Chip had beaten Utah and number 6 Cal. Remember they came in riding high and it was 42-3. Nick Aliotti doing quite a job that day as well, but this year BYU, UCLA, couple of ranked wins, top 15 opponents who come into Autzen Stadium. Both teams, 09 and now, are beating inferior teams the way they should. And the team that was good the year prior seems to have gotten better, right? Oregon that first year with Chip Kelly at the helm won the Holiday Bowl in 2008. Masoli ran over the safety. I remember it very well. It was a good day. I loved when the Holiday Bowl was the number 2. Not as big a fan of the Alamo, especially if it were a Pac-12 team in there. Anyway, different conversation. Last year's team was good. I know they were flawed. I know they were limited. I was there for every single game in 2021. But they were still a good football team because they won 10 games. And even if you're not hitting your ceiling, you can still be a good team if you're winning 10 games. And Oregon was a good team. But this year kind of feels like they do a lot of things better than they did the year prior. Their offense is more prolific. And so you run down that list of similarities and think, well, yeah, maybe we are set up for that sort of coaching job here from Dan Lanning and company. We could be. We absolutely could be. It's still a bit early, but I thought the number of similarities there was pretty fascinating. And I like what I've seen from Dan Lanning so far. The question, it feels the same. Does it have that sort of trajectory? I think you got to let the whole season play out. And here's why. In 2009, the Ducks were riding high, got that big top 10 win against USC in the second half of the year for sure, but also had a stumble. You lost to a Stanford team that ended up being 8-4 on the road. This year, that looks like that game would be Oregon State, who is a good but not great team that you'd lose to on the road. That Oregon team in 2009 barely escaped against Arizona, right? 2 overtime game, Masoli running it in. And then they won a thrilling game against the Beavs to end the year, lost in the Rose Bowl, ended up 10-3. Right now, Dan Lanning and the Ducks are sitting at 6-1. And it feels, because of how they are playing, like 10-2 or 11-1 is seemingly inevitable. And given the schedule, I think they're going to end up 10-2. I still think that because in year one, for a head coach, a first-time head coach, even as good as they've looked, think about that 2009 season. Did you think they were going to go in and lose to Stanford? I didn't. I was at that game. I left very disappointed and a young Spencer very upset. It was not a great thing to witness. We couldn't tackle Toby Gearhart. But going into it, did we feel like it was a game prime for an upset? No, you went into it and said, well, the offense has been rolling. They're doing this, they're doing that. Every week in college football presents a new challenge. And I think right now, Oregon fans, it is okay. It is 100% okay, in my view, to be optimistic. But we should not be in an area where we feel borderline cocky because it's still been 7 games, not 12. You still got 5 more to play. And Washington's going to give you their best shot, and they can score a lot of points. And Oregon State's defense is legit, and we got to play them on the road. And Utah is still a good football team. Cal and Colorado, I'm not worried about those two because I've watched them play this year. Those better be big wins. They should be big wins. And based on what we've seen from Oregon and how they've performed against teams that I think are better than either this year, or at least comparable, I think the Ducks will be fine. But you don't want to get in that mindset where you look ahead, right? Building a program, as Lanning is doing right now, up to its full potential doesn't happen in one season, right? Even USC in their remarkable turnaround, they're not going to be as good now as they will be in a couple years. Because even if this Oregon defense makes strides, I expect it to be better in 2 or 3 years, and the offense should be at a similar level, right? Even if the offense takes a step back, because you just have a lot of turnover and such, and things really, really clicking right now. But let's say in a couple of years, you have an Oregon team that still has Kenny Dillingham as the OC, and the offense is 90% of what it is right now, which is good enough to win. I think the defense will be better. And that defense still has room to grow, and it still has some holes that I don't know if you can fully plug because you got a new coaching staff and they're working stuff in. Here's what I do know: athletes rise and fall in the ranks, but when it comes to saving money, Simply Safe always stays on top. Right now, you can save big with Simply Safe Home Security. They're giving listeners 40% off their advanced security system. Simply Safe was just named the best home security of 2022 by US News. You will absolutely love it. They've got 24/7 professional monitoring when a threat is detected. Simply Safe's monitoring professionals promptly contact you and dispatch first responders to your home, even if you're away or unable to respond. 24/7 professional monitoring costs under $1 a day. That's basically nothing. So don't miss your chance to save big when you protect your home with the best. Get 40% off your order when you visit simplysafe.com/locked on college. Customize the perfect system for your home in just a few minutes. That's simplysafe.com/locked on college. There's no safe like Simply Safe. I'm not trying to be an alarm ringer. I'm not. I feel really, really good about this staff and Lanning and everything that's there. But I think it's easy to get in this mindset and this mode of everything is going well right now, so it's going to continue that way every week for the rest of the season. That's asking a lot. In 2019, when Oregon had rattled off, it was 9 straight wins. Lost to Auburn, 9 wins in a row. They went to the desert as a two touchdown favorite. Came away with a loss. 2 touchdown road favorite. Anyone think they were going to lose that game? I'm just putting that word of caution out there that just because something is happening now doesn't mean it can't keep happening in the future, but it also doesn't mean it will automatically continue to happen in the future. So to go back to answer Aaron's questions, how many parallels can be drawn? Well, I listed out a lot of them. I think we're still in that kind of wait and see period of, is this truly going to be something special? It has the makings of it, but you got to do it over the course of a season. You can't do it for just over half a season and say, well, yeah, we stumbled on in the second half there, but you don't want this to be Oregon's peak, right? Because you don't want to look back and say, gosh, they were playing so well for that stretch. How did they not keep it going? What happened there, right? Then questions start to arise. So I think we watch the second half of the season. We enjoy it every single week because we talk a lot here on the show about stuff that gets us ready for the season. Now it's here. Don't overlook. Don't look ahead. Enjoy every game. Enjoy every win. Enjoy every moment. Enjoy everything that you can. And then we'll continue to assess as this goes along. So I hope that's a good enough answer to your question there, Aaron. A quick one from my guy, Animoli Marty McFly. And this is mildly off topic, I suppose. But he said, when are you going to come to a game? Would love to say what's up. Now, most of you probably know or remember that I work for Southern Utah University. I do their TV play-by-play on ESPN Plus for all their home events. But every now and then, I get an opportunity to do a little bit of radio for them. If there's nothing at home and there's a team that I can travel with, call some games, I always love doing that as well. TV radio, very different from a play-by-play perspective. And let me tell you, my guy Marty McFly, about Monday, November 21st. Because, yes, indeed, on November 21st, that Monday, in the month of November, I'm just repeating it so that we are all operating on the same wavelength here. I will, in fact, be in Eugene calling a game for Southern Utah women's basketball on the radio as they take on our beloved Oregon Lady Ducks. So if you want to meet me in person, you want to come say what's up, get to Matthew Knight Arena on Monday, November 21st. I don't think there's a game time yet. You can look it up and follow along and such. And of course, hit me up or follow me on Twitter at smalls_55. I would love to meet as many of you as I can in person because I very much appreciate what you do for me here on the show. I hope you feel the same way. And so it's hard for me to get to Duck games with the other job that I have, and it's hard for me to, see as many as I'd like to in person. I haven't been to Autzen Stadium in way too long, but I will be inside Matthew Knight Arena on Monday, November 21st. So if you want to come say what's up, go check out the Lady Ducks, who should be a good team again this year. This question I talked about last week on the show, but I didn't feel like we really had time, Max and I, to give it the full run through. So I wanted to come back to it again. And it's a relevant question as well. Tomorrow I'm going to talk about college football playoff scenarios for the Ducks and what they would need to happen, breaks they would need, who'd need to lose, everything there, because I've gotten a couple of you who've asked me about that. That's coming on tomorrow's show, no doubt. But This was one, and again, it's from a name that I can't repeat on the air on YouTube, but you know who you are. Realistically, do you see the Ducks reaching the college football playoff in the next 4 to 5 years? Recruiting looks good, but compared to some other schools, I feel like Oregon is in the lower upper class of the country. It feels like we're not quite there, or it feels like we're right there, but not quite hitting that threshold. Go Ducks! You're the goat, Spence. Appreciate you, man. So I want to give us a full run through here because I felt like we just kind of only had time to gloss over it a little. The last Pac-12 team to get to the college football playoff was Washington in the 2017-18 season, or was it 16-17? I think it was 2016-17. Washington leading into that year had recruited at a top 30 level and had several future NFL players and a good quarterback in Jake Browning. Not an NFL guy, but a good, solid, productive college quarterback. I think when you look at the model to getting into the college football playoff, there isn't just one way to do it. You can have prolific offenses like Oklahoma and play no defense and outscore everybody, get there and try to just outscore your opponent. You can be really balanced like Bama. You could have a top tier defense like Georgia. You just have to be a good football team all around. But looking big picture at the trends that we need to continue to see for Oregon to get into the playoff, you do have to be recruiting at that sort of level. The good news for the Ducks, though, we know what the last 4 years have brought. They're going to be in the mix for the top recruiting class in the Pac 12, and it's looking like top 15. And as I record this, by the way, they've gotten a couple more commitments, one of which was in the class of 2024, tight end and in state tight end. Remember that time I said, don't worry about not getting Riley Williams, top in state recruit in the class of 2022? Yeah, that was just a Mario connection thing. So still good on that particular front. And so I don't expect to continue to see top in-state talent, limited though it may be, continue to go elsewhere. But that's beside the point I'm making here. So what Washington had for that particular team, and you can think about this with Oregon as well, is they recruited well, but they had a lot of NFL players. And you don't always have to recruit guys who are almost ready after maybe one season of college football to be in the NFL, like a Noah Sewell or in theory a Justin Flo, though schematically I don't think he's quite there. Or Penny Sewell was clearly ready to be in the NFL right away. When you're looking at the roster, and you can look at Oregon's 2014-15 or Washington's in 2016-17, for a Pac-12 team to get there, you have to be able to look back and say, man, look how many guys they put in the league. There are very few teams, very, very few teams who get to the playoff and who you look at their roster 5 years later, and there's just not that many regular NFL players or key contributors that are playing at the next level, right? That Oregon team that got there. You had Marcus, of course. You had Royce Freeman. You had Thomas Tyner, who might have been an NFL back if he hadn't, unfortunately gotten hurt. You had a couple NFL offensive linemen. You had Efo on defense until he got hurt. You had DeForest Buckner and Eric Armstead. Like, you look back and go, man, that team was kind of stacked. And Washington was recruiting at a top 30 level. In Oregon, if they keep recruiting a top 15 level, which I think this staff is capable of, right? This is their first full recruiting cycle. It's off to a really good start. It's off to a really, really good start. If they can combine that with an elite level of development for a couple low 4 or 3 star guys who become either really good college players or NFL guys, that's the formula for Oregon to get there from a roster standpoint, right? Just looking at Washington, for instance, guys like Taylor Rapp ended up in the NFL. He's had a really good NFL career. That was a 3 star recruit. So I think you have to balance, even if you recruit at a high level, getting those high caliber guys, right? The high 4 and 5 stars, the Jurion Dickies, the Dante Moores, the Josh Connerleys, those sorts of players, Troy Franklin as well. You get those sorts of guys. But to really take your roster to the next level, you often have to have a 3 star who's playing like a high 4 or 5 star by the time his college career is in his second or third season. Because you're not going to be able to get all the talent in the world, but to have the sort of roster depth necessary, you've got to be able to do both of those things. And is Oregon that far away? I will answer that question after reminding you this episode brought to you by LinkedIn Jobs. These days, every new potential hire can feel like a high stakes wager for your small business. You want to be 100% certain that you have access to the best qualified candidates available. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs, which helps you find the right people for your team faster and for free. Go in there, post your job, Add the purple hashtag hiring frame to your LinkedIn profile to spread the word that you're hiring. Small businesses rate LinkedIn jobs number one, numero uno, for those of you Spanish speakers out there, in delivering quality hires versus leading competitors. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the candidates you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. That's linkedin.com/lockedoncollege to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. Oregon is at that sort of level. If you're in the top 15, top 20, right, and Washington did it with perennial top 30 classes, that's enough talent to get to the playoff. Winning a national championship, that might be another step. That might be another step. But if you're just talking about getting into that top four, playing in one of those two college football playoff semifinal games, Oregon has to be able to keep recruiting at this level. All indications seem to be they're going to be able to do that. Is Oregon that far away? No, I don't think so, right? Just from a roster standpoint, recruiting, they keep it at this level, they'll be okay. They probably need another good class or two in the coming years to have a roster made up of those sorts of guys, but are they that far away? No, I don't think so. And think about this. Georgia trounced us this year, right? 49-3, ugly, disaster, terrible, Oregon's bad, all of this sort of stuff, yada, yada, yada. You know who else they beat the crap out of last year? Michigan. You know when they played Michigan? In the college football playoff, which is why I say these are two different questions: getting to the playoff and having a team good enough to play for and hopefully one day win a national championship. Those are two different questions. But if you get there, do I think Oregon is that far behind Michigan right now? No. If the Ducks were to get to the Rose Bowl this year at 10-2 and end up playing Michigan, gosh, that'd be a heck of a football game. That would be a fantastic football game. But Michigan, in the years leading up to their college football playoff berth, which took time, mind you, remember, Jim Harbaugh was there for what, 6? I think he's been there for like 7 years. It's been a really long time. So you have to be willing to be patient with these coaches sometimes. Everyone wants that sort of instant success. It doesn't always happen as quickly as people want. But Michigan, leading up to that college football playoff appearance, recruited at a top 10, 15 level. Looks like Oregon's going to be able to be there, right? That's what they're showing with their 2023 class, which is currently ranked 12th in the country. If they keep recruiting in that range, yeah, you're going to continue to accumulate enough talent in addition to what you've already got, right? Mario and company did not leave the cupboards bare. He noted that when he went over to Miami. He's not wrong. There's a lot of talent. We're seeing it this year. We're seeing it maximized more than a season ago, but we are seeing the talent that is still there, and there's depth behind even the guys that we're watching and may move on after the season to the NFL. Some of them most definitely will. But if you're talking about, are we recruiting at that sort of level? Yeah. Yeah, we are. And could they get to the playoff this year? It's theoretically possible. That'll be my tease for tomorrow's episode. It is possible, if Oregon wins out, that they could get there. That'll be for tomorrow. But a couple more thoughts on this. I know everyone's excited about Dante Moore. I am too. I don't need Dante Moore to be a Heisman Trophy caliber quarterback. Now, Oregon fans might be thinking, well, that's how we got there last time, right? Mariota was so good. He was amazing. Yeah, he was. But look at the other teams who have made. Here's a list of quarterbacks that have made the college football playoff. And you can't be bad at quarterback and get there. But you don't have to be Heisman Trophy level. Jake Browning wasn't. Cade McNamara wasn't. Any Notre Dame, literally pick any Notre Dame quarterback. Michigan State got there with Connor Cook. You can do it with good, bordering on great, but just good, above average quarterback play if you have the rest of the roster in a situation that allows them to compete at a high level, which is why recruiting is so darn important. But the other thing that you need, or the other couple of things really you need to get to the college football playoff, you got to have a season where you put it all together. And that is easier said than done. Much easier said than done. You got to catch a break every now and then. If Oregon gets to the playoff this year, if they run the table, which would be awesome, I think that's asking a lot, but let's say that happens. What are we going to look back and say about the games we played? Imagine if we'd lost to Washington State. Should have lost. Heck, I was talking about the 2009 season earlier. They got to the Pac 10 championship game. because they beat Arizona. Could have lost that game. Some would argue should have lost that game. Trailed double digits in the fourth quarter. It was 24-14. Ended up coming back to win 44-41 in double overtime. But those are the sorts of things that teams often need to get to the playoff. And it's not unique to Oregon or the Pac-12 or anyone on the West Coast. You have to have that for the most part if you're anybody. Georgia had to escape Missouri this year. Missouri, not good. Chase Daniel ain't walking through that door. They are not a good football program. Georgia had to escape them. Auburn wasn't very good last year. Bama had to escape them. You have to have those sorts of games in your schedule. And speaking of the schedule, you can't have more than one loss in a year where you want to get to the playoff. And usually you need a good non-conference win. Now, next year, for instance, Oregon plays USC and Utah, but not UCLA. The non-conference game is Texas Tech. Pretty mid to that's a pretty mid-tier non-conference game, which is why I hate college football non-conference schedule. But that again is a conversation for another day. So many conversations we could have on other days brought up here on the show. But that's a component of it as well. Would Oregon have gotten into the playoff in 2014-15 if they had played, I don't know, that year's Texas Tech team instead of a top 10 Michigan State team that had been to the play or that would, go on to make the playoff in the following year, I believe, and was a good football team? Maybe, but did it help their case a lot that they had that top 10 win on the schedule? Yeah, it did. And so when you're thinking about, to bring it back to the original question, can Oregon football get there to the college football playoff? Yeah, they can, but you have to see all these pieces align. You've got to have a good enough schedule. You've got to win a game that you can lose, right? Look at Utah this year. They can't get to the playoff because they lost to Florida and their stud quarterback threw a game-losing interception in the end zone, which was inexplicable. It's not something he does. Putting the ball in jeopardy. They stumbled twice inside the 5. It's that thin of a margin with a 14 playoff. When it goes to 12, that margin gets a lot wider. And you can probably be a 2-loss team depending on who your losses are, especially if you're in a Power 5 conference. And you wouldn't necessarily have to be a conference champion. But for now, in the coming years, you have to have those things work in tandem and align in a given season. It's a hard thing to do. It's why Oregon hasn't been back. Even though they've won a lot of football games, you got to have a lot of things go right. Appreciate the questions, everybody. Love all of you very, very much and appreciate what you do for me here on the show. Appreciate everyone listening. Have a wonderful rest of your day and go Ducks.